I didn't feel proud the day the house was appraised. Most people imagine a moment like that as some kind of victory scene. Mine wasn't. I was standing in the kitchen, leaning against a counter I had installed myself, while the appraiser walked slowly through the rooms with a clipboard. The house smelled like fresh paint and old wood, a strange mix of new work layered on top of years of damage. 4 years earlier, the same place had been a ruin, broken windows, mold creeping up the walls. Parts of the ceiling sagging so badly, you could see the sky through gaps in the roof. When I bought the property at 17, the realtor had actually warned me that most buyers only wanted it for the land. The building itself was considered a loss. That didn't bother me. What mattered was the price. I had been saving money since I was 15, weekend labor, warehouse shifts, construction cleanup jobs, anything that paid cash. By the time I found the place, I had managed to put together a little over $150,000. Not because anyone helped me, because no one did. The appraiser finished his inspection, stepped outside, and sat in his truck for about 15 minutes doing calculations. When he came back, he handed me the report. $480,000. He said it casually, like it was just another number in his day. I nodded, thanked him, and watched him drive away. Then I stood there alone in the quiet house. It felt strange, knowing what the place was worth now, because the work that created that value had never felt dramatic. It had been slow, boring most of the time. Weekends pulling rotted drywall out of the walls, learning how to replace plumbing from manuals and videos, working night shifts, then waking up early to repair flooring before heading back to work. There were winters where only one room had heat. I finished the bedroom first so I could live there while the rest of the house was still just beams, insulation, and exposed wiring. For years, my family barely paid attention to any of it. When I first told them I bought the property, my father laughed. My mother said it sounded irresponsible. My brother didn't say much, but in our family he didn't need to. Everything naturally revolved around him anyway. He was 2 years older, confident, always talking about the big things he was going to build someday. My parents believed in that future so strongly that when he turned 20, they gave him $215,000 to start a business. They called it an investment in the family legacy. I remember the phrase clearly because they said it more than once. A legacy project. The money moved through his life quickly. Office space, equipment, a car that looked good in business photos. A couple different startup ideas that never really stabilized. Meanwhile, I kept fixing the house, piece by piece, year by year. By the time I turned 21, the structure had changed completely. The roof was rebuilt, the plumbing replaced, new electrical wiring ran through every wall. The floors were level again. The place wasn't fancy, but it was strong and clean and livable. That was when the appraisal happened. And that was also when my family started asking questions. At first, it was small things. My mother asking to see photos. My father wanting to visit. My brother showed up one afternoon and walked slowly through the house with his hands in his pockets. "Didn't realize it turned out like this," he said. I just shrugged. A few weeks later, he asked if I had ever thought about keeping the property and the family. I didn't know what he meant, so I ignored it. Then his business collapsed. The money my parents had given him disappeared faster than anyone expected. Loans went unpaid. Creditors started calling. Suddenly, the confident future everyone had imagined for him looked very different. That's when the conversations with my parents changed. They invited me over for dinner one evening and explained something I had never heard before. According to them, the house I rebuilt was connected to the same family resources that had funded my brother's business. They said the financial support they gave him had allowed the rest of the family to stabilize, which indirectly helped me succeed. It took me a moment to understand what they were implying. My father leaned forward at the table and said ownership of the house should probably be shared. I told him the property was legally mine. No one raised their voice that night. The conversation ended politely enough. 3 weeks later, a lawsuit arrived. The documents claimed I had benefited from financial advantages intended for the family legacy project, and that the property should legally belong to both me and my brother. Reading it felt unreal. But I didn't confront them. I hired a lawyer and started gathering paperwork. Every permit, every invoice, every loan document, every bank transfer. When you rebuild a structure from almost nothing, you learn to document everything carefully. Over the years, I had kept records for nearly every dollar I spent. The case dragged on for months. During that time, my parents and brothers submitted financial statements trying to prove their version of events, that family money had supported the house indirectly. And that's where things started to fall apart for them. Because once those documents were filed in court, they had to be verified. Investigators began reviewing the financial history behind the claims. Transfers that were never reported properly, income that didn't match tax filings, statements that contradicted earlier documents. The turning point came during a quiet hearing. My lawyer didn't say much. The judge asked a few questions while reviewing a report investigators had submitted. Then the judge paused. It was a long pause. When he finally spoke, the tone of the entire room changed. What began as a civil dispute over property was now being referred for criminal review because of fraudulent financial statements filed during the case. After that, the process moved quickly. Charges connected to financial misrepresentation, investigations into past filings, consequences that none of them expected when they first decided to claim the house. I didn't celebrate. At the final court appearance, I sat quietly in the back row and watched them avoid looking at me. There was no dramatic confrontation, just silence. Months later, after everything had ended, I returned to the house one evening after being away for work. The front porch lights glowed softly against the dark sky. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The floors were solid, the walls straight. The quiet of the place felt almost peaceful. For a long time I stood in the living room, remembering what the house used to look like when I first walked through it years earlier. Back then, it had been falling apart. Now it was the only thing in my life that hadn't. Eventually, I turned off the lights and went upstairs. Some victories don't feel like winning. They just feel like the moment you finally understand that certain distances can never be repaired.